Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years, pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world. Friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week I have the first three-time guest on the podcast. I'm pretty sure she's the first. Cheri Dostal Ryba. Now, Cheri and I know each other in real life, and when I was building out the season of the podcast, she was the perfect match for someone who would have some much-needed language around the creative process. And wow, was I right on that instinct. I know I personally needed to hear her words on curiosity and learning through the process of doing. For those of us who are not trained in a creative art, like myself, I think there's a discomfort in the idea of claiming the creative label for ourselves. We kind of think, creative? Me? That's for people who really know how to, and you can insert whatever creative endeavor your heart desires in the next sentence. But then we think, me? I'm just winging it. Well, surprise, surprise, my friends, we are all just winging it all the time and making our own creative output in the process. I know when I was first learning how to run a business, I had this idea that everyone else knew so much more about business than I did. And sure, that was true, but also what I was doing, even as a newbie, was creative work. Cheri also talks about the ebb and flow of creativity and how when you finish with one creative output, there is sort of a fall-winter period where we rest and recharge and shift our brains and hearts and nervous systems. I think I've actually quoted that particular part of this episode at least 5 times since we recorded and thought about it probably a dozen times more. In the capitalistic system that we're all a part of, we feel like we need to be outputting things constantly. You know that idea, if we don't use it, we lose it. But creativity does need a softer and quieter season. So I'm very glad that Cheri brings that up in our chat. Now, before we get into the meat of the conversation, if you'll do me a favor and please follow the podcast from wherever you're listening, that would tell our algorithmic friends that they should show this podcast to more people like us. And y'all know we are better when we connect together. And we do have a discussion guide for this series, which you can snag in the show notes. This guide will give you ideas on your own creative process, and there are group discussion questions if you want to snag a Yoga Pro friend and go have a chat and chai time on creativity. Okay, let's get into it, my friends. Here is my conversation with Cheri Dostal Ryba. Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, so another creative conversation is in your earballs this week, this time with my friend Cheri Dostal Ryba. Cheri, will you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
I will. Thank you for that
Yay.
lovely introduction. I'm still feeling the belly laugh inside of pronouncing my name. And the whole docile rhymes with nostril, these enthusiastic pictures of me as a young girl. And so this passion for creativity has really meant that my life has been entrepreneurial. My career and livelihood and kind of drive has always been what can I do next? What am I interested in? How do I follow these breadcrumbs of my own journey and story and desires, as well as the women that I work with? And that has been really juicy and fun. So I am a movement educator. I am a retired personal trainer, group fitness instructor, right? Started in the fitness world and then shifted to yoga and therapeutic approaches. I have a dance degree. I have 2 daughters, and I wrote a book. So I'm the author of Pelvic Yoga Therapy for the Whole Woman. The book's been out for a few years. And so this whole person approach to pelvic health and women's well-being has very naturally paralleled intimacy and sexuality, which now feels like a very inherent part of who I am becoming, which is fun, as well as in my work, right? That pelvic health can't be this sterile, medicalized thing devoid of consent and pleasure and our sexual self. It has to be included. And so I'm excited to be bridging some of that gap for people to know that like living in your body can be like a pretty cool thing.
Yes, actually, immediately I'm like, oh, I actually want to talk about that too. So before before we hit record, we had this whole like, okay, we're going to talk about these things, and then I'm like, oh, but also there is a creative aspect to like sexual health too that I think you and I have. I feel like Cheri and I know each other in real life and have chatted many times. Like I feel like we've been on this road together before, but there is that creativity is also in that as well. So I was when you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, there's so much about your life that's very wildly creative.
Well, thank you for that. I've really enjoyed our friendship and conversations as well. So where do we start out of all of these threads?
Let's start at the beginning because I do want to talk about this moment of, because I think in people's heads, it's easy to have an idea and think, I want to build a thing. I want to do a something. But it's so very like up in the ether at the beginning. And it's the blank page, essentially. How do you start to create something from nothing? You've built many things. You've written a book. You've created so many different things. Like that moment where you're faced with nothing but ether and a hope.
Hope and a prayer.
Yeah, like how do you start that creative process?
Yeah. One of the things that I think I do most of the time, like relatively repeated reliably, is to ask questions, right? Like figuring out what is it that I'm kind of tracking or sniffing out or interested in. And sometimes that's journaling. Usually it's more of like a living instinctual inquiry where I'm just noticing and paying attention to that thing or that theme, or flipping a question from like what is or has always been towards what else is possible, or what am I curious about, or what is it that I'm not seeing. And so that quality of inquiry, it's part of yoga. It's svadhyaya, it's self-study, it's this practice of awareness that we take on the mat and off the mat. And I think for me as a dancer, the skills of improvisation and choreography, right, of like being able to ask those questions and bring that ether, as you called it, right, like this kind of nebulous, liminal, unclear inquiry. We literally bring that down to earth and into form through our bodies. And so for me, it's being able to kind of like pluck that inquiry and breathe it and live it and walk with it and notice it in my relationships and in the world and in the work that I'm doing with others, especially when there's like the synchronicities of like, like 4 times this week a client has asked me about this thing, right?
Yep.
So I'm a fan of noticing patterns and asking questions, and that ability, I guess, to kind of channel it and bring it down into an experience or into movement, and start to play with like the qualitative aspects of that thing or that question in my body.
Yeah.
Which is very different. I was thinking about this morning. It's very different than like the rote memorization of a sun salute, or the form of the rectangle of being on your mat and doing this pose into that pose into the next pose, right? Like there's a real structure to how some people do or teach asana. And I think I've always been a bit of a rebel in that regard, where the somatic inquiry and the lifeblood of it is the living experience of it, and finding something in the moment that feels good or that feels novel and different. And that kind of like weaving and generative way of doing a quote unquote asana practice has been really like fruitful for my body, but also I think it's part of my creative process.
So there's this moment, I think, as you were describing this, going from the big, like this idea that you might have, to the very real tactile experience of how that comes out in your yoga teaching, or if you're a business owner, how that comes out in like a program or something that you build for the world. So there's this like point going from big to small that I think we're just going to call fear. That it's just like you have this big idea. And you have this desire to build something creative or to teach a class even in a new, creative, different way. But to get from that big idea to the actual building of the thing, you have to get past the gatekeeper of fear, right? Like, do you feel that way too? Like, there's a moment where you're going, this could be just nonsense in my head, because there's a lot of nonsense that happens in all of our heads, you know?
Yeah. Or like we can get so, or at least for me, when I was much younger through 20s, you know, in my teaching work, like I was sort of like unbridled in my faith and trust in myself and what I was doing. And like, thankfully that worked out pretty great. Lots of times, you know, rinse, repeat, of just doing a lot of teaching and a lot of private sessions, and, you know, building those skills from the unknown to the more known and familiar and like masterful kind of qualities, you know, of facilitating an experience for someone. But yeah, so there's like a different kind of humility that has grown in me, which every once in a while can dip into a little edge of like self-doubt or impostery, whatever, of like, well, just because I was successful at all these other things, does that mean like I've still got it? I don't know. So there is a different quality of how I hold myself and hold my ideas now, and yet there is like a potency that can come from that messiness of just like figuring it out as we go. And so I think sometimes we need to get over ourselves and not take it so seriously that like, you know, my life is over if I offer this workshop and nobody signs up and it's crickets, right? Like, you are still a valid, worthy human being. I am still a valid, worthy human being. And, you know, there's this quote, I forget who said it, but something about art making, that like, it's not up to us to decide whether it's good art. We just have to make a lot of art.
Yeah.
And if this is our career, right? Like we've got some skin in the game, and we hope that it supports us financially, and, you know, that we also get the warm fuzzies of people enjoying what we're offering. But yeah, so there's this uncoupling or detachment around our identity, our worth as a person, and the creative process that helps kind of mitigate that fear. I'm going to pause and let you chime in. Yeah.
Oh, I actually really want you to go further on that, because I do think that's really important. I think especially as you get good enough at your work that, you know, people will say, good job, or hey, you've done good work. And in my mind, that has to be uncoupled from the process of creating something new, because otherwise you're in it for the praise and not for the work, not for the creativity, not for the building of the thing. Like, I really love how you said that, because for me, I will just say that is a vital part of the process.
Like unhooking our identity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about the parallels of creativity and sex, and I think just being honest and real and authentic for me is always more enjoyable and more fruitful than like a performative or faking it or
Yep.
being something that we're not.
Yeah.
So like, PSA, no more faking orgasms. Okay. Um, yeah. So in that creative process, like this idea of like big to small or formless to form and specific, like how do we create a thing that is clear and cohesive and valuable in terms of like the experience people get from it or the transformation that they experience from it. We have to be or learn how to be comfortable in the messiness, comfortable in the awkwardness, and hold ourselves kind of to that fire of like, how am I being sharpened? How can this be clearer, not better in the performative outcome based goal, but better, clearer, deeper, more valuable, more like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting to. That's what I want to share. That's what people want or would pay money for, right? If we're looking at
Yeah.
teaching a workshop, for example. And so, yeah, finding the real honest heart to heart truth for me as a woman and as a facilitator when it comes to women's pelvic floor health, sexuality, et cetera, right? Like these are topics that so many people shy away from because it's too uncomfortable, it's too
Yeah.
awkward, whatever it is. And so if we just say, like, you know what, everybody farts. You know what, you're gonna have awkward moments where like you need to change position or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so just learning that that is normal and that that's part of the process of finding our way to that satisfying thing that we're trying to generate or create. um I also like one of the other kind of like, I guess, tools or strategies is like this kind of funnel image, or sometimes I call it zoom in, zoom out, and I make my little telescope for my eyeball. Um, so yeah, when it's big and nebulous and unknown, like I don't know what I want to create, but I think it's something like this, or I think it's something about this goal that people have. I find that it starts to narrow a little bit, starts to zoom in as we ask the question or we name the thing, but then it kind of like goes really wide and kind of sprawly and unruly and gets bigger, bigger, bigger sometimes before it actually can funnel back down
Yep.
to something really specific. Um, and so when I find myself kind of getting caught in inaction, right? Like just the
Yeah.
mental loops of trying to figure it out or trying to think it out, or like the waiting for it to be clear versus the, well, let's get in the muck and sort through it and figure out how to clarify it. That's sometimes a tool that I use. Do I need to zoom out and think bigger picture or step into someone else's shoes, empathize? Do I need to zoom in and like really say the thing I want to say or get more bold and
Yeah.
in my specificity with it
Yeah.
and zoom in?
Is that for you? I'm just like very excited to talk now because I'm like, oh, this is really fascinating to
Yeah.
hear. Not that I wasn't before, but I'm like, this is really the nitty gritty of a person's creative process.
Mm,
And so I'm interested to hear, is that like an internal process for you? Are you using other people as sounding boards? Like,
mm.
how are you wading through that? I know in my process, it is almost always an internal process. Like I'm going through it for myself first to the point where I hate it. Like that is part of my thing. Really, truly.
Yes.
Like I'll build a thing and I'm like, I hate every freaking thing about this.
I don't really hate my creations, but what I sometimes get tired of is like hearing myself talk about it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like just how close we can like clutch this thing to our chest sometimes and
Yes.
what it takes in terms of like the marketing engines of getting our ideas out to market, out to other people's eyeballs, or you said
Yeah.
earballs earlier,
Yeah.
which I love.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we get other people's eyes and ears and hearts invested in this thing that we're doing? And we do have to say it a lot, right? Like we do
Yep.
have to get used to sharing about the thing again and again, maybe slightly different angles and nuances, right? To keep it interesting for ourselves, but also kind of like touch on what other people care about. But yeah, sometimes I get sick of talking about the same thing. And I have found that that's been both generative and healthy for me to evolve and follow the next creative impulse, but at the same time, continue to hold myself accountable for more mastery of what I'm still doing or what I'm
Yeah.
continuing to do, if that makes sense. So it's both and like there's this novelty of the creative process as well as the mastery and refinement of the creative process. Yeah, so it's both.
Yeah, I think it's something you've hit on something that is really important is this idea that when you build something creatively, and so we're talking to yoga professionals here, whether it's a workshop or a course, or you just want to be more creative in your teaching. I think in the beginning, a lot of folks have this idea that you just build something and it becomes into the world perfectly, and you get to like wipe your hands of it and be like, I've built this thing and it's done. But iteration is so much a part of the process, like the little minor shifts and changes, and how can I get better? And sex is a good example because nobody's ever having sex, and at the end, they're like, well, I nailed that. And I'm
I
never going to
mean,
change a
it's
thing.
nice once in a while to have that like, thank you.
But we do have
Yes.
the like common idea that that's something that will always shift and change over time, but we're not
Mm,
taking that attitude into other creative endeavors, right? Like we somehow feel like it has to come out of you perfectly.
mm, mm. For me, this is embodiment, right? Like this
Yeah.
is process over performance. This is
Yes.
building the comfort, maybe the courage to be in the experience that we're having versus the appearance of the thing that we're doing or creating. And yeah, just growing that skill set of tracking our instincts, our intuition, our felt sense.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, embodied process is part of that for me. Um, yeah.
I also like you talking about when you build something creatively, part of the process is sharing that with other people. And that I do believe is true
Mm,
in any creative endeavor, whether it's your writing or your art or you're writing a song or you're building a yoga practice or whatever that is, it is that moment that feels so vulnerable when you have to show what you've built to the world and then say, okay, so I've built this thing. Do you like me?
you
And I
gonna
know,
sign up?
yeah, like you and I are both sort of going through that process right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm launching my digital magazine, and I had this moment. Somebody bought like a pre-order for it, and I haven't even like put it out yet. And I was like,
Yeah.
and it was just like that thought of we do have to share what we want with the world, and damn, is that super uncomfortable sometimes. I think.
Yeah. 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 Especially I think for me because it is quite coupled for me sometimes still this the way that my personal experiences and path have fueled a lot of my professional creativity, right?
Yes.
Like there is some coupling in there that I'm working on kind of unhooking from. And yeah, I've just had like a season of pretty big creative output and kind of feeling like I'm pulling out all the stops and doing all the things to share about the Satisfy retreat, which is coming up in a few weeks. And I do have some folks registered. You know, it's a go. It's happening
Yeah.
regardless. But I would love for more women to trust that discomfort or dissatisfaction they might feel about their body, their intimate relationship, their pelvic floor health, and trust that that discomfort is aiming them forward, right? Like that dissatisfaction is fuel that is showing them what they deserve, what they desire, what is possible for them. And it's all in us, right? And that's one of my favorite ways or parts of facilitation, of being in the room with people in person, right? Is like seeing those light bulb moments and seeing that guard melt and like women come alive, right? Like it's really
Yeah.
fun. It's really, really
Yeah.
fun and juicy. And so I think it's possible for everyone, right? Like I sometimes hear people say, "Oh, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible enough." Same thing with creativity. I'm not a creative person. It's like, no,
Yep.
bullshit.
Yes.
You are
Yes. Yes.
alive and breathing, which means there are possibilities. And we just got to figure out, like, well, what is the thing that feels like ripe and fertile and interesting enough for you that will compel you to like embrace some of that awkwardness or
Yeah.
discomfort, right? That like if it's something that we value, something that we want for ourselves, or that we see in another person, another woman, another yoga professional, rather than that stopping us or creating the whole jealous imposter syndrome whatever swirl in our minds, like can we just say like, oh, what is it about that person, or what is it about what I see happening in them or in their lives that I want for myself?
Yeah.
And how can I, like welcome a little bit of that tingle and figure out how to walk that path for myself?
Yeah, I think that you've hit the nail on the head too, that sort of, because it is like what a human experience to, when you're building something creatively, whatever that might be, to want the result
Mm,
versus to want the process.
mm,
And when you're in it for the process, I think not only do you get better faster at the
yeah.
process of it, because now at this point I'm like, there's, business I think is wildly creative. I'll look at something and be like, oh, there's nobody who's going to outthink and outrun me if I've got the creative process, because I love that part. It's not
Uh-huh.
even about what happens at the end of it. It's very much about the
Yeah.
process of building and creating. And I think that's really helpful for me, is that it's the journey there. It's how
Mm-hmm.
yoga is this? Like, it's the journey,
Mm.
not the result.
Mm. Yeah. The way you were talking just circled me back to the question you asked earlier. I don't think I answered it of like, is this an internal process or sounding
Yeah.
board or, you know, yeah, I don't know how many times I have found myself so consumed by and enraptured by the thing that I am generating, like alone in my office or, like alone on the mat or, in writing in my journal. Like, so that kind of private, almost indulgence of creating the thing for myself. But that is not in isolation, right? Like I see you actively having conversations with other working yoga professionals, for example. I'm doing the client work, right? And like talking with lots of women about their experiences and their body, et cetera. So while it is a very inward and personal, maybe indulgent, private process that like I love, like a creative cave, just spending
Yeah.
several days or weeks, like sniffing out the thing that I'm generating and like outlining it and giving it form and beginning, middle, and end. What's the arc of it? And like giving it that structure. But that also is informed by these relationships and conversations with others. That then is what I'm tracking in terms of the inquiries, the patterns, and kind of the fuel for then like, oh well, if I'm hearing and seeing this, then I'm going to generate this solution, this path, this process that I can take people on as a journey to maybe highlight and give a voice to, bring vocabulary for them to what they've not been able to name for themselves.
Yeah.
I think is part of this, pelvic health, sexual health piece is sometimes we don't have the words when we're stuck in the discomfort of it or the feeling of that's not for me, or that's not possible for me, or that hasn't yet been my experience. It's like, okay, well, let me figure out how that path could unfold for someone
Do
so
you
that they could
feel,
have that experience. Yeah, go.
I was going to say, do you feel, because it sounds like you're saying it's a little bit of both. It's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of that internal
Yeah.
inquiry and then the external sort of experience of interacting with other people and how they interact with what you're building and creating.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like do you feel like the order matters? Like you have to be internal
Mm,
first and then go to the people versus going to the people first and then
mm.
going into self-inquiry? Or does that depend on the challenge or the thing you're trying to build?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, some of the more sort of alive, present offerings of mine, like the 9-month women's program Inhabit, which is an online program, the in-person Satisfy retreat that's coming up in a few weeks, and then from that, I've like plucked this thread of satisfaction and the etymology of
Yeah.
that word of to make enough, to remember that we are enough, right? That
Yeah.
satisfaction isn't like this thing that we have to go out and get or fake it till we make it, or this external performance or goal. It is this remembering that we're enough. And so to extract that little thread and then like the refinement to rinse repeat and turn that into a pop-up workshop. Right,
Yeah.
it's like that
Yeah.
that level of refinement and mastery then of like, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, it would be better for me to take this as an iteration, as one thread or nugget of the bigger picture, and get it that much clearer and sharper. And so that process for me has been like very sort of dovetail or like parallel of both hearing from other women and my customers, my clients, as well as my own process and breadcrumbs. And like that has woven together. When I wrote the book, it was very different, where I had studied and practiced and written and read and, all, like gathered and almost consumed, right, for many years, to then come to the place of like, I think I'm going to write a book about this. And when I did that, I like closed the door for like that 18 months of writing the manuscript. Not closed the door on conversations. I worked very closely with Shelley Prosco as a mentor, right?
Yeah.
Specific content expert and sort of like research literacy person to check my own blind spots. But otherwise, I was not taking courses. I was not signing up for trainings. Once I did my market research for the book proposal, I was not reading other people's books about pelvic yoga
Yeah.
anymore, right? Because it
Yeah.
was time then to find and trust what I wanted to say in my manuscript. And so that was a distinct choice, in writing the book, that it was like, okay, pause on taking in what others have to say, because I've got to figure out how to write this book and put my name on it. So what do I want to say? Right. And so just that discernment, I think, is helpful. And maybe to catch what is our pattern, right? Like if our pattern is to always default to others, more trainings, more certificates, more books, more study, which we know happens so much in the yoga world, right?
I'm nodding so emphatically, guys.
At some point, you gotta turn towards your own voice and your own
Yeah.
perspective, and figure out how to trust that, to put your thing into the world and figure out what you have to say about it.
I just need to say, because I'm going to put this in your brain and I'll probably
Uh-huh.
text you directly later. I need you to do like a 6 week something that intersects sex and creativity.
Mm.
Because I could hear you talk about this forever. Because
Mm.
you have a very clear understanding of what the process of creation is. And I think not everybody does. You just know that you're building a thing and fuck all with how you get there from point A to point B. You know what I mean? You're just like, here it is. But
Yeah.
I do think you have such great language behind the process of creation. Like hearing you talk about the book, for example, and you're right, for a book proposal, you do have to be in the world and know what the market is and understand, who you're speaking to and what those people need. And then to use your phrase, to shut the door on that in order to build your own voice for that is
Mm.
something that is so vital
Hmm.
and not a lot of people say with that amount of clarity. So just I'm going to put that in your brain.
Thank
Like
you.
build
Thank
that.
you. Thank you for that. I'm not quite at the place right now where I want to build a new thing, but
Yeah,
I will circle back and we can jam on that.
someday.
Um, I do want to make sure we talk about power tools.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is, I asked before we started, I was like, oh, we're talking about vibrators. But no, she's really talking about power tools.
Okay, so a moment about vibrators. I have one. I
Yes.
sometimes use it, but it was not something that was part of my own sexual practice or self-pleasure practice for many, many years, right? Like clean hands and privacy, like I tell my kids,
Yeah.
right? Like our awareness and our ability to be with ourselves doesn't need all the bells and whistles necessarily, right? Like it can be a door opener if you're looking for a novel experience or to kind of like get through a little hump of
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? um but again, our skills of presence, embodiment, touch, sensation, breath, energy, like those will always be the foundation, or dare I say the most important part of sex or creativity, right? Like it is literally our expression, our life force coming forward. um that being said, I have had some really good joy with a table saw and a palm sander.
That was the best. That was the
um,
best segue ever.
because yeah, not for sexual pleasure purposes, but I'm
No.
exploring refinishing furniture and doing some flipping of I sold a mid-century style dining room table a couple weeks ago, so I'm like officially a professional because I received payment, right? But this is like a legit hobby, and my work has been so compelling and my main focus for 20 plus years that my hobbies were always so adjacent or similar to my career path that it didn't feel like I had a freaking hobby. So
Yeah.
when we moved back to Wisconsin, I got into gardening and landscaping stuff like on our property. And now that we've landed here in Madison, I bought a very ugly green 9 drawer dresser, and have stripped it, sanded it, popped off the ugly plastic molding of the center drawers, and then wood glued my own um, maple, raw maple trim to the center drawers, bought hardware. I'm in the process of choosing a stain and like actually finishing it. And that will become like our entertainment console in our living room, right? This like big
Yeah.
solid wood piece of furniture. And so there's something that has been like uniquely satisfying and tangible about like sawdust, the smell of sawdust, and the power saw in my hand, and just figuring it out step by step. And so one of the lessons for that is I wanted to do this years back and picked up a dresser off the side of the road for free, like I do. Total curb alert
Yeah,
right
yeah,
here,
yeah.
no
Yeah.
shame. But that particular piece of furniture, like it sat in our lower garage at our other property, got some water damage. Like it ended up just being a waste, right? Like it went to the dump when we ended up moving from northern Wisconsin down to Madison. So the lesson for me is the same as so many other points of life or topics in life, is that it's only scary until you start. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
idea of doing the thing and the way we build up the anticipation of getting ready to do the thing is we create our own monster internally
Yeah.
of then getting stuck in this like analysis paralysis, or this kind of swirl of the unknown, formless bigness of like, I don't know how to do this yet, or I don't know what I'm creating yet. And we literally sometimes just have to start, like put pen to page,
Yes.
open a Google Doc and just start typing, ask a question and then ask another question that's a little narrower, right? Like we've literally got to take action and be in motion for the thing to start getting clear.
Yep.
Right. And so like working with wood, wood furniture is like a very tangible material, physical thing that I can see, I can touch it. It has form and structure already. But the process of like, well, how do I not ruin this? What's the best, solvent or stripper to buy and use without like, killing my lungs in the process or whatever, right? Like there were so many questions that stumped me before, that then something clicked in the last few months where I was like, F it, I'm just gonna do it. And if it ends up a sticky mess and the wood is ruined or whatever, like I'm out $30. Like
Yeah.
no big deal,
Yeah.
right? Like this is relatively low stakes. And we learn through the process of doing, right? So I think, for any of us that are like, we're swirling in the unknown, we want to do the thing, but we haven't done the thing for years, right? Like I have some clients and students who are like, I want to start writing again, or I want to start painting again. And through like the Inhabit program or our one-on-one work, they eventually end up reporting, once they've gotten like in touch with their physical flesh again through embodiment practices, they pick up that artistic hobby, right? Like
Yeah.
that creativity starts flowing again because they have connected to what's real and what's tangible through physical form, and yoga can do that for us. But it is a little different if we are following a script or doing the vinyasa flow that we love and maybe always fall back on,
Yeah.
or if the lineage is such that this is how you do your practice, right? Like that can either block and limit and kind of deny our creative life force,
Yes.
or we can practice in a way that is really generative and life-giving.
Yeah. So there's a lot that I want to ask you about that, because I do think I am often talking in the business realm of things, and people don't often pair business and creativity together, but I do very
Mm,
strongly.
yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm hearing you say is like you have to produce through doing. And once you figure out how to do a thing, you can do anything. Like once you figure out how to go through a creative process once, you can create whatever it is that you want because now you know that you can do it.
Mm,
And it's almost like, so I see so many people get stuck in the thinking, in the swirling, as you said,
uh-huh.
before the doing. And I'm a big believer in doing it before you're ready, doing it
Mm-hmm.
before you feel confident about it. And through this conversation, and it's funny because you and I've had many conversations, and this is the first time I'm like, oh, she has that same fearless quality that I do. Like there's something to a fearlessness that you can cultivate that's just that I'm gonna fricking do it and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
feel like that helps people create new things and build new things.
Mm.
How were you
Yeah.
just are we just born that way?
I
And
will say that there's been a clarity in me, that like once I found movement and dance, like that was it.
yeah.
I mean, I tried out for majorettes, which was like dance team pom pom stuff, but like we did halftime performances and like parades, homecoming parade, whatever else. So it was, the movement was structured almost like poms or cheer, but there was still the creative, generative aspect of like, let's do choreography for this next season or this next game or whatever, right? And I remember like marching up and down the gravel driveway of the home property where I grew up, with the gravel under my feet and just like hitting every move. Like this is my life. Like
Yeah.
somehow dance and movement found me, or I found it, and I just knew like that's what I want to do. And luckily, I had a mentor, my dance coach in college, who said, I think you could really make a thing of this. Why don't you apply to this college and audition for this dance program? Blinders on, like I did in my
Yeah.
teens and 20s. That was the only university I applied to, and I didn't get in when I first auditioned. So then I was like, oh, I guess I'm still going to this school. And I ended
Yeah.
up having to find my way through other majors and back to the dance program and ask, please let me into this class. I promise I know some things about dancing. And once I got into the class and was working with the professor, it was like, sure, you can go from this level 1 to level 2. You should re-audition, but the rest is history. And so there has been that like sort of calling for me that has been clear,
Yeah.
um, as well as this kind of drive to do the thing that's generative and good, which, now in hindsight, I can see so many layers of like family of origin stuff that like easily could have thwarted this whole path. And
Same.
somehow, yeah, and somehow I was determined or hellbent or stubborn enough to trust what I was tracking internally, right? That like movement felt good, dance and expression felt needed, necessary. Um, and yeah, being able to mobilize, right? If we talk nervous system for a hot second, like I've always been more familiar with, or my kind of imprint and patterning has been sympathetic drive, mobilizing, taking action, figuring it out.
Yep.
Versus in certain aspects of life, I'm now more familiar with freeze, dorsal shutdown, and how that has played out for me. And maybe, some of the patterning around sympathetic drive and action taking has also stemmed from those, conditions and adversity and, whatever else early in life. And so, yeah, it's been both a softening of the drive and uncoupling, identity and worth from the work
Yeah.
I'm doing in the world. So like a softening and trusting more refinement, more connection, more belonging, often a slower pace, although I still like to do a lot. I'm still a very ambitious woman.
Same.
Um, and learning like where that freeze has shown up, where that inertia, inaction, doubt, collapse, etc., had been in my system. And like just these past few years, really studying that part of myself and figuring out how to trust the vulnerability of that and how to warm to the possibility of engaging or expressing myself in new ways, and largely in terms of intimacy, both emotional and sexual intimacy in my marriage, and bringing more of myself forward, is scary. And yet when we're in it, when we're doing it, when we're trusting, we can figure it out. And luckily I have a partner who's like on board with that and is also growing in some similar ways. It's been really beautiful.
How do you know when you're complete? When you build a thing, when you create a thing, how do you know when you're done? And then what do you do besides lay on the floor? Because sometimes
Yeah.
I sort of have that sensation of I've laid it all out, to use
Yeah.
that dance analogy. I left it all on the floor.
Mm.
Um, how do you know when it's done and what do you do to recover so you can build again? Because this is, I mean, if you're cultivating creativity, I have found that's just never something I want to quit. It's something that I feel like
Mm.
now I'm going to build this new thing.
Mm.
So, yeah, those two
Yeah.
questions.
Um, the first thing that comes to mind is like when my book came out, I was complete.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right. Like it was COVID. I had a 6-month-old when I went into the book contract and like writing earnestly, like towards the finished manuscript. I completed it and turned it in 1 week ahead of deadline. Was like, woo, hot damn! Like I did it, and I was done.
Yeah.
Other than like finishing the edits and stuff like that, like the other steps, like before it going to print, I did drop it. I did just have to like leave it
Yeah.
for a period of time. And I don't think that was as much a conscious choice as it was more like bandwidth related of like, I've just done a big thing. And once it was edited and going to print and kind of out of my hands, like it is now in motion beyond my control.
Yeah.
And will go to print and be pre-order and out in the world. I couldn't build another thing right away.
Yeah.
In fact, my website was broken and like, some things needed dismantling, honestly, for the next iteration then to, for example, come into doing the Pelvic Yoga Book Summit this past May of
Which was amazing.
2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, this big like 2-day celebration of bringing the book to life chapter by chapter with some really cool people on board, thankfully.
Woo.
Yeah, and you were there. That was 3 years post publication before I did like kind of the next big thing or next big iteration of that particular part of my work, right? So sometimes like I think our bandwidth, our body will choose for us of like, we've just had a big generative output and now it's time to like leave it and carry on with day-to-day life and be with my kids and, just kind of like rinse, repeat the normal routine and reestablishing some of that new norm of not needing to carve out hours per day, per week to plug away at the manuscript, So trusting the fall and winter season, like, right, like that emergent and celebratory spring, summer of like, this is cool, this is happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is out in the world. But like, no, I needed a fall and winter. I needed to return to myself and get resourced again in some just foundational day-to-day ways before that next thing could be created and brought to market or full circle where it's like it exists now, right? Like the recordings are still available, PS, right? So building a thing that lives beyond my output in the moment, I think has been one of the other good lessons for me of, like when I'm building something to teach in real time, there is that actual bandwidth to show up and do the thing and deliver what was created that then is complete, when the workshop is done and everyone says thank you and goes home and maybe there's a feedback form and you've been really helpful for me in that way of doing the postmortem, like do
obsessive.
the postmortem, do the reflection on what you just did to mark the sense of completion, to gather insights about what worked and what you want to tweak to do it again.
Yeah.
And so, being able to iterate and master and refine on a few themes has just been kind of a natural evolution in my creative process or in my career, versus feeling before like I was always throwing, spaghetti at the wall or like reinventing the wheel, following kind of each separate impulse versus at this point now, a couple decades in, thankfully, it's kind of streamlining, right? And there's a few key themes or skill sets that I'm helping other women develop for themselves.
I think trusting the fall and winter is hard. And I see this in a lot of people who create in a less sort of what we would think of as your traditional creative outlet, like dance or art or singing. But business owners, I think, never trust the fall and winter. Mm-hmm. Like, it's because I think what happens, and I hear you describe that and how you built your book, is that there's so much to be done and you've built so much time out for this thing that when it's done, you feel the vacuum, but don't say, oh, that's a vacuum there. And that makes people nervous. Like they
Yeah.
have to fill that empty space with something else because you feel, I feel
Mm.
like we all sort of have that sensation of the emptiness within us after you've built something. And I see it, it is so tempting, again, to use dating and sex as an example. When people get out of relationships, there's a vacuum and we rush to fill it instead of going, nope, this is my fall and winter. I'm
Mm.
going to pause and sit with that space. How do you
Mm.
coach people? Because I know you're coaching women all the time. Like, how are you coaching people to sit with that space? It's deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's uncomfortable if it's new or if we're not practiced at it.
Yeah.
And yet, I think there's, again, I go back to like instincts a lot, right? Like, I think when we choose to be connected to ourselves, to our felt sense, to our bodies, especially if we are a cycling woman or a postpartum woman or going through perimenopause or second spring postmenopause, just to know that we are nature. And when we're connected to our bodies, we have this more instinctual remembering of like, oh, right, like the fallow season after harvest, like we put the garden to bed. And this is good. This is
Yeah.
good and normal to prepare for, to expect that we're going to have some fall and winter
Yeah.
seasons in our lives. And, you know, that happens on, if we're cycling, menstrual cycling, right? Like that happens on a pretty regular monthly-ish basis. Um, and it's counterculture, right? Like, so when we're connected to the rhythm, the pace of our aliveness, it's very natural and normal. We learn to trust the discomfort of it. And we learn to see, oh, this collective drive, or what Liz Cook would say is the sympathetic soup of our Western culture,
Ooh, nice.
the sympathetic soup we're all living in, right? This is
Yep.
counterculture to the dominant conditioning that most of us have grown up under. And yet it is a timeless, ancient, embodied knowing that there's a time for everything, right? Like to
Yeah.
everything, turn, turn, turn,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, so that commitment, you know, like these, this knowing has become a structure and a framework in my teaching and the way that I facilitate for clients and groups, right? That like, if we have a commitment to embodiment, that means we're committed to seasons and processes, and we are remembering, we're unearthing, uncovering what has always been true about what it takes to be well and vital as a person, as a woman. And when we can start to see, like, you know, the threads of personal conditioning, cultural, religious, capitalist, etc., conditioning, it gets easier to remember and to
Yeah.
trust that fall winter, that liminal time of shedding or letting things go, or trusting that like we just did a big thing and it's come to completion, and now maybe we rest, maybe we have to grieve,
Yeah.
and that is as necessary, as beautiful, as fruitful as all the doing and, you know, output of our creativity, that all those seasons have a purpose. So yeah, I mean, I'm not thankful that I've had grief in my life or loss in my life, right? Like it's hard and it sucks. Um, and yet there's again been kind of this almost trust in it from, you know, I lost a brother when I was 14, he was 19, right? And so at kind of a real formative, like
Mm.
budding spring summer age, you know, we had a major loss in our family. Um, and so being at least familiar with grief or loss has actually served me well. And again, to just know that like this is part of being human. If we're alive, we're going to experience loss.
Yeah.
It's just part of it. And that loss can come with love and build our courage and bring some really beautiful opportunities to connect with the people who are willing to be in it with us, and maybe also help us more clearly discern and weed out the way that others are not able to show up for us, right? That doesn't mean there's judgment, or doesn't have to be judgment or resentment or whatever, right? But just like a clear-eyed, like, oh, they don't have the capacity for that right now.
Yeah.
And how do I continue to trust my process, and that this is the season that I'm in, and that I am held in that by the people who are present, right? So yeah, um, there's a personal, private, I think, journey that we're on, most of us as yoga professionals, right? Like, we found our way into this work through our own stories, our own lived experience, or our own desire to feel different or feel better, or, like the ways that the practice has kind of fed or nourished us, often then, compels us to teach and share it. And yet it becomes a public thing when we want to show up and offer something to the world that's, maybe quite tender and quite personally important or meaningful. It becomes a public shared thing at some point, if we're going to put it out into the world.
Yeah. I just have to say, before I'm going to tell you to tell everybody where to find your retreat and all of your online stuff, because I know they're going to be obsessed with you too. But like, I love having conversations with people that make me more obsessed with them at the end of the conversation, where I'm just like, fuck, I'm so glad that I know this person. And I'm so glad that they've built something in the world that other people can do. So I feel that way very much right now in this conversation. And so thank you for all of that, truly and honestly and sincerely. So now I need you to tell everybody else how they can find you and become obsessed with you too.
Thank you. I feel the same. I love our conversations. Thanks, Rebecca. So the retreat is November 13 to 16. It's in the beautiful driftless region of Southeast Minnesota. So drivable from, Twin Cities Metro, Eau Claire, La Crosse, Rochester, Madison, bleh. And it is called the Satisfy Retreat. So it's a chance to reconnect with yourself and know you're enough and worthy as you are, and trust the path of pleasure, that we don't have to delay pleasure until one day, someday, when all of our shit's figured out. But like, no, that is the path.
Yeah.
Connection, vulnerability, courage. That is the path. So the Satisfy Retreat is on my website, cheridostalryba.com/satisfy-retreat. And time's ticking, right? So if you're listening to this, it is time to make your plans and envision joining us for these 4 days. It's going to be really magical to be together in person after still, so much of us operating through screens and online, and to be surrounded by nature. So that's the Satisfy Retreat. There's other programs and things on my website. The only other one that I'll mention is I just put together a free resource for pelvic care. So it's 2 masterclasses. There's a sacred anatomy workshop or teaching class, as well as a more experiential practice, Broad Beloved Landscapes, where you start to connect with your own skin and pelvic bowl and felt sense of like, yummy and cozy. And you can get that for free. That's on my website too.
Nice. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was so good. Thank you, as always, for this discussion, Cheri. Here are our key takeaways. First, curiosity is part of the process. I think many of us who don't have creative training have this idea that people just inherently know what to build and be creative about. This isn't true necessarily. First, you become curious and ask questions and be open to where those answers might lead you. Next, don't take your fear too seriously, especially when it comes to your creative output. Fear is often the major factor blocking us from being creative and then putting out there in the world. As Seth Godin is well known for saying, Art isn't only a painting. Art is anything that's creative, passionate, and personal. The great art resonates with the viewer, not only the creator. So go create things. Create them for yoga, create them for your business, and then share them, because that is art at its best. Next, it's incredibly difficult to unhook our identity from our creative output. I think everyone who's ever built anything feels that struggle. People liking our work and people liking us often feels the same inside of us, but it isn't. We are good and worthy people, even if only one person signs up for our new workshop. And that doesn't mean that we don't have something worth making. It just might be a sign that we might need to iterate or shift things a little bit. Next, speaking of iteration, this is part of the creative process. We shift things when they aren't working. It doesn't mean that we need to start over, but it might mean that we need to tweak things bit by bit so that they become a more full representation, both of what we want to build and what others want to see and experience from us. And finally, building something creatively is both an internal and external process. We need to go inside and get curious and see what we're inspired to build or create or problem solve, and then also have a relationship with the people whom we're trying to serve. Art and creativity are meant to be shared with others, even if it's scary. Okay, next week on the podcast, we have a chat with Ransom Noble, a science fiction writer and yoga pro who now has the privilege of being the person on this podcast who knows me better than any other guest. The two of us have known each other for decades now, truly, and we talk about mermaids, creative writing, and the winding paths that take us through the world of yoga. Until then, thank you for listening, my friends. I'm so grateful that you've chosen to spend your time and attention with me. Let's go get to work, and I will catch you around the water cooler next time.